A burst of thunder, a crack of lightning. 3 witches appear. That's the start of Macbeth, one of Shakespeare's bloodiest and most disturbing tragedies. We're going to talk about that opening right now in this video. Act 1, Scene 1, The Witches. Now, don't forget to subscribe to this channel because I'm going to be putting out a lot of videos about Macbeth in the coming months, and you want to know when the next video is going to come, so subscribe. But you're not going to be able to see all of my videos of Macbeth on YouTube. Some of them are on my platform. The link is right there at the top of the description below. You'll need to go into my platform and sign up and join up in order to watch all the videos on Macbeth, and also in order to do the online activities that accompany each video. These are interactive activities where you can test your knowledge and understanding of the videos that you've watched. So I really encourage you to sign up and do that. Okay, so Macbeth is a play that belongs to the Jacobean period. What's the Jacobean period in the history of England? That is the period when King James I of England was on the throne. It's called the Jacobean period, not the Jamesian period, the Jacobean period. He came to the throne in 1603 after the death of Elizabeth I. And he was a controversial ruler. We'll come on to that in some of the other videos. But the first thing you need to know about him is that he had written a book called Demonology. And in that book, he said that witches exist and that they are agents of the devil. Another thing you need to know about King James I is that when he came to the throne, he became Shakespeare's patron. Shakespeare and his troupe of actors were actually sponsored by King James I. They became known as the King's Men. So Shakespeare was writing under the patronage of King James I. And here he comes writing a play in 1606, which is after James I had only been on the throne for a few years, writing about witches and portraying, as we will see, these witches as being quite evil. So what Shakespeare seems to be doing is to be supporting King James's views that he'd outlined in Demonology. Yes, there are witches, and yes, they are evil. Now, for Jacobean audiences of 400 plus years ago, these witches would have been terrifying. Remember, they didn't have the cinema, they didn't have the horror genre that we have. When they went to the theatre, they were getting shocked in the way that you might get shocked when you go and see a disturbing movie. You have to try and put yourself in that mindset. These witches appearing in a burst of thunder and lightning are terrifying for an audience of 400 years ago. And you need to know a little bit more about the beliefs of those times to understand this fully. So thunder and lightning was supposed to signify bad omens to Jacobean audiences. In fact, they thought that if there was trouble in the skies, there was also probably trouble in the social sphere. Something was going on socially. And so immediately before any characters have appeared, that thunder and lightning is unnerving for the audience. And then outburst the witches. The audience at that time would have thought, thunder and lightning can release evil forces. So the appearance of the witches with that thunder of lightning really does make them look evil right from the start. They're in some undefined place, aren't they? They talk about hovering through the fog and the filthy air, so it's kind of foggy, and that symbolises the mystery surrounding them. They also talk about meeting Macbeth on the heath. Now, the heath is open land, not land which is civilised, so they're kind of operating outside the civilised sphere of human events, and this sets them apart and makes them even more disturbing and mysterious. There are are other unnatural things about them as well. Now, any theatre goers of that time would know that Shakespeare's human characters talk in what's come to be known as blank verse. That's iambic pentameter, which is a rhythm that goes like this. Da 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 da. 5 beats per line. Da 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 da. But these witches, they're not talking with 5 beats per line at all, are they? When shall we 3 meet again, in thunder, lightning, or in rain? They're talking with 4 beats per line. They're not talking with pentameter, they're talking in tetrameter. Now, it's not a fixed kind of tetrameter. Sometimes it's got an iambic rhythm at the beginning, sometimes it's trochaic, but it's definitely tetrameter, 4 beats per line. They're also talking rhyming couplets. That means the first line rhymes with the second line. Again, rain, done, won. Those rhyming couplets. Now, that doesn't sound anything like the human characters who we're going to meet in Act 1, Scene 2. So this sets these witches up as being, not very human. Also, that 4-beat rhythm really makes it sound like they're doing some kind of incantation or even a spell. And they're arranging to meet Macbeth. And we think, are they preparing some kind of spell to cast on him? Something else that's very supernatural is that they seem to know the future. They're talking about when they're going to meet, and they say it's going to be when the battle's over and they're going to meet Macbeth. Later on, this turns out to be absolutely true. When the battle is over, they do meet Macbeth. So they've got this gift of foresight, which is also quite disturbing for the Jacobean audience. Who are these weird creatures who seem to know the future? They're also accompanied by their familiars. Greymalkin and Paddock, those are the names of their spirit animals that wander around with them. Much like in the modern day, there is a belief where witches are accompanied by a black cat, for example. In those times, witches were thought to be accompanied by all kinds of different spirit animals that seem to be calling them. So another sign to the audience that these are supernatural beings. So all of that makes them seem completely unhuman, supernatural. But on top of that, they seem to be connected somehow to really ancient forces. And theatre goers of Shakespeare's times and theatre goers today, or even if you've read your Percy Jackson, might recognise the fact that there's 3 of them seems to link them to those very ancient powers, the Fates. Okay, the 3 women who in Greek mythology measure out with string the length of each human life. One of them, Clotho, is spinning the string. Lachesis is pulling it out to its length, which will represent the entirety of a human life. And then Atropos is the one who cuts the string that symbolises death. Those 3 women were supposed to be in the background of all human endeavours in ancient times, spinning the string of life, pulling it out and cutting it. And the fact that there were 3 of them and there's 3 of these witches puts you in mind of those ancient and powerful, uncontrollable forces of fate. You couple that with this idea of that they're going to meet Macbeth, and you start thinking maybe they kind of mess with his destiny, right? They seem to be preparing something. They seem to be plotting something. The final thing which really links them with otherworldliness, with non-human values, is the way they talk in paradoxes. Now, a paradox is a statement which appears to be logically impossible, but when you think about it a bit more deeply, you see, it could well be possible. And the first paradox they use is when the battle's lost and won. On the surface, that doesn't really make much sense, particularly the first time you listen to it. You have to think about it a bit more deeply to realise, actually, that could make sense. One side loses, one side wins a battle. So that paradoxical language is slightly confusing and strange, but the real clincher is the phrase, fair is foul and foul is fair. Now, this is really their calling card, isn't it? It kind of echoes throughout the play, and it's right there in Act 1, Scene 1. At the end of the scene, it echoes in the audience's minds. Fair is foul and foul is fair. What does that actually mean? Well, there are various possible meanings. Fair could mean beautiful. What does it mean that fair could be foul? Well, that could mean that beautiful could be ugly, and what's ugly is beautiful. So they might be saying that what appears to be beautiful or what appears to be nice and pleasant could actually be ugly, which is introducing very early on this theme of deception, that appearances of beauty can actually hide something much uglier, which we'll explore later in the play with characters like Lady Macbeth or even Macbeth's castle. And when they say foul is fair, those witches, perhaps they're talking about themselves. What appears to be ugly, we find out in a while that these are haggard old women with beards. What appears to be ugly to them, perhaps, is beautiful. They seem to be ugly, but they think that they're beautiful. Another way we could interpret the words fair and foul is if we think of the word fair in terms of justice. You know, if you're playing a sport and someone hurts someone, you say to the referee, that's not fair. Okay, that's not fair. That's not just. So think about fairness in terms of justice. So fair is foul is really saying justice is unjust. And what is unjust is just. Now, that really does seem paradoxical, doesn't it? But this, in fact, is a play in which the Kingdom of Scotland comes under the sway of Macbeth, who is a tyrannical ruler, ultimately. And so he doles out justice, but his justice is not just. And similarly, when they say foul is fair, injustice is just, again, they seem to be talking perhaps about their way of seeing the world. How they do things, their kind of unjust way of doing things is, in fact, just, at least in their minds. What they seem to be setting up here is some kind of inversion of the moral order, right? They really flip the moral order on its head. The technique of chiasmus is used here. Chiasmus is any A, B, B, A pattern in language. So when you get fair is foul, that's A is corresponding to fair and B corresponds to foul. You get that flipped, don't you? Foul is fair, B, A. So that's an A, B, B, A pattern, and the technique is known as chiasmus. And that use of chiasmus really cements this idea of the inversion of the moral order. You think things should be AB, but they're flipped around and they become BA. And then off they go, hovering through the fog. I mean, that's not the way you or I walk, is it? Hovering. Amazing. They really are painted as these supernatural, disturbing figures. And if it's done well, even today, this scene in the theatre or in a film can really be quite disturbing. They kind of drift off and they're gone. So, in summary, Shakespeare sets up right from the start this shocking and terrifying atmosphere, a world which seems to have an inverted moral order and which these supernatural and potentially quite evil forces seem to be hovering behind everything. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you for Act 1, Scene 2 on my platform.